Hi, I'm Jean Szulc, and welcome. Welcome to Counterpoints, which is the podcast in this channel. Bring people in, people from music, like music-related people, just to bring their perspective over different aspects of music making, music composition, performing, whatever it is. And today, I have guests here. We have Pia and Zack. I want you guys to introduce yourselves.
So my name's Pia. I'm a violinist and I live in the UK, and I'm currently studying at the Royal Northern College of Music in Manchester, and it's my undergrad first year.
Hi, I'm Zack. I am a bass trombonist who is studying at the Cleveland Institute of Music for my master's degree.
And if people want to find you, where can they search for the stuff you do, social media, and so on?
I have an Instagram, so if you'd like to follow me, it's at thisviolinlife.
And for me, it's Instagram as well. My handle is LittyZM, LITTYZM. You can also friend me on Facebook if you're into that. I use my Facebook as a place where I post more professional recordings, so you're welcome to follow me there as well.
And I'll link all of those in the description, so if you're interested in checking those out, you can just go down there and take a look, and I highly recommend that because it is really cool. So let's just dive into the actual conversation. I think to start, something that I would like to get your perspective in is like performing new versus more established works. And I think you will both have like very different perspectives because like, the violin has like a gigantic repertoire. Like, you can play your entire life within one period of classical music, right? And like the bass trombone like is quite different from that. So I think there will be quite some differences. Like, what are your thoughts in like performing new works, performing more established works, and so on?
I think for me, because I've had the odd experience doing this, especially performing new composers' works that have specifically been written for that reason, for the concert, for that performance. It's really different to a lot of other violin playing because there's quite a lot of extended techniques usually. So it's quite challenging in that sense that you've got to make them come alive and make them really appealing for the audience as well, and get the right message across, because it's sometimes quite unusual, maybe for the audience member and the player. So I guess, yeah, playing new music compared to your traditional, you've got to make it really appealing for the audience. So it's great that you've got all this interpretation, but it's also, yeah, it can be quite difficult because you've got to pull people in still because it's so new. So, yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, especially with extended technique.
Yeah, definitely.
Classical trombone, like more established works like Mahler, Wagner, Stravinsky, we know how to play in those styles really well. And then we get something new, and then the composer's written something crazy because they know the trombone can do glissandos better than pretty much every instrument. And so they give us something crazy that we've never really seen before, and the extreme high or the extreme low of the register, and it's kind of interesting because we like there's the excerpt community in like the orchestral excerpt practicing that trombonists do is ridiculous. That's like most of our auditions is just orchestral excerpts for anything, not even just for an orchestra, like even just for like sometimes even for like teaching positions, you have to demonstrate that you have knowledge of that repertoire. And then to get something brand new, it's almost nice in a way because you have so much more freedom to do some of your own interpretation because there hasn't been, 100 years of people playing it before you. So you sort of get to set that precedent and work with the composer in some cases, which is really cool. So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, that was something I was going to ask. Like, do you both think it's easier when you have like this? You don't have much of a precedent of like people playing a particular excerpt, or like because if you if the composer lived 200 years ago, you can't really connect with him, or her, but at the same time, you have a lot of people who already did like kind of this job for you, and you can learn from them. But when you don't have like people to learn from, because you're basically the first one who's performing that piece, you also have more of a connection with the composer because you're living in the same age, right? So what are your opinions on that?
I think similar to what Zach was saying, it's really nice that you can actually often talk to the composer. So if there's a bit that you're not sure about or what it means in the music or technically, you can actually ask them and they can tell you exactly what they want. Whereas obviously you can't really do that if unfortunately someone's not here anymore, like Beethoven, But sometimes when I actually am doing classical, baroque, romantic work of composers that are again dead, I sometimes like to start the work if it's new by not listening to interpretations, because then I can have an almost fresh sense going in, exactly what I want to get out of it. Then I can obviously take inspiration from recordings, etc. So in a sense, new compositions and new works are great in that sense for me personally, because the reference is just not there at all to start with. But then you obviously have to get really creative.
Yeah, there's sort of almost two sides to this this sword as well, because on one hand, it's really great to talk to composers about what they wanted to do, but at the same time, even if you're playing repertoire that's from somebody who has passed away, sometimes the modern interpretations of that, at least for our for like low brass specifically, sometimes the interpretation is a little bit different because we have different instruments now. Like our instruments are larger overall, and they can play louder, and they sound different. So sometimes our interpretation has changed just as the instrument has evolved. Because 100 years ago, nothing even remotely similar to this existed. Like the modern bass trombone was the like independent valves was really invented in the 1970s. And even still, people are innovating on the trombone and changing the design and changing the sound to get closer to what people want. So it's a little bit interesting to also compare the modern way that we play classical repertoire versus how they would have played it when the composer actually was alive. So it makes me wonder if later down the line, if some of these newer works are going to sound a lot different if they catch on like works of Beethoven have, and we're playing them 250 years down the line. It's going to be kind of interesting to see how that evolves as well.
Yeah. Question: do you both compose like anything, or are you more just performers?
I'd like to do it more. I've had to do it for assignments, etc., but I'd like to do it more in my free time. I respect you guys a lot.
Well, I respect you guys a lot as well. So,
Yeah, I do occasionally compose stuff, but I've done a lot more arranging than I have actual original compositions, because that's a lot easier, in my opinion, to arrange something that's already been written. But occasionally I'll write something for trombone quartet or something like that, just to sort of explore some aspect of the trombone, because that's obviously what I'm most familiar with. But apart from doing like music theory composition projects, not much outside of that.
Yeah, and something that I would like to ask you both is like, when you are composing, or like even if it's just something you apparently like believe that your compositions aren't like a big effort of yours, right? So even if it is a very small effort in very small projects, do you find that playing your instrument, if you're writing for that instrument or an instrument of that section, helps like compose for that? Because for me as a composer, like I only play the electric guitar, and I've never written anything for the electric guitar really. So like I genuinely don't know if playing an instrument actually helps really compose, to find that there is any influence.
I mean, I guess the obvious is obviously you can try it out on your instrument and you can see what works and what feels comfortable. As a stringed instrument, for me, I find certain keys work better on the instrument, with the harmonics as well and the actual strings, the way it's tuned. So that's always good to try out. But when I have composed, I mean, I can play the piano, but I'm no pianist. I will often go towards the piano to compose. I think because I've got that harmony there straight away. Whereas obviously I can do double stops, quadruple stops, etc. But it's a lot harder on the violin. So I think it depends really what you're after in the composition.
Sure.
I would say if I was a composer and I had the choice to learn an instrument versus not, I would say definitely I would. Because specifically for trombone, a lot of times people will write stuff that's not the greatest suited thing for trombone. Not even like talking about like playing quickly, because it's actually not that difficult to play quickly on a trombone. Like you can't do insanely fast stuff because of the physical nature of moving the slide. But we can keep up with a lot of people. But I find a lot of more modern rap has a very limited register or a very, very, very wide register. So either they like hardly use any of the range of the trombone, or they use like the absolute extremes. We played a piece. It was a double bass concerto, and it had this really insanely hard glissando line that like practically every note change was a glissando, and it was all like insanely high above the staff, like high D, and just like the two tenor trombonists in the orchestra were just like, God, this sucks, because it just doesn't lay well. So it does help to have a good knowledge, at least, because like even online, I came across this the other day when I did a Google search about something. I don't remember what, but like like an orchestra library website came up that had all the ranges of the instruments listed, and they were completely wrong for trombone. Like all of the trombones were completely wrong. It said the contrabass trombone had a better high range than the bass trombone, which is like absolutely false. Because if you think that's big, you should see a contra. It's almost as tall as I am, and I'm 6'1". That's not easy to play in the high register. So even online, the resources aren't necessarily reliable to what's actually true on the instrument. So I feel like it's at least having a basic understanding of the fundamentals of maybe not just every instrument, but at least like the families, like the low brass family, and then the high brass family, and then all of the string families and all of that. I feel like that would be more beneficial than just trying to rely on online knowledge, because it's not always the most reputable thing I've found.
Sure. Like I guess something that affects this a lot is that the fact that nowadays most composers use orchestral libraries, and orchestral libraries can do pretty much like anything you could possibly imagine on an instrument, because they are just a recorded note that like the instrumentist played in like the most ideal conditions you could possibly imagine. They just play a really high up the staff notes and they stop. They can prepare as much as they want for it, and so on. So this, I am sure that it influences a lot of people, especially people. I mean, myself. Even I am sure that this influences me because I am not from a classical setting, and I only got into classical music like really recently, and I mean, I've made a huge effort to catch up, but at the same time, I haven't had much contact with classical musicians and like actually in the field. I've never like been part of an orchestra and so on. So I think that like this kind of MIDI setting that people are like a lot of people are used to really influenced this, because you can just write whatever you want and it will sound awesome as long as you work on the MIDI file for like enough time. So and like, I mean, especially for people who write in MIDI and then extract the score from it, then like sometimes like if you do this, like that's not something I'm used to doing. Like I almost never use MIDI really. I generally use Sibelius, but like writing in MIDI is something that really affects your perspective over like music in general, and most composers use it nowadays. So I think that's a really important aspect of it all. So something I think is interesting to discuss, kind of around all of that, is like how much should a performer really care about the image a composer had in their minds initially? Because if you're a performer, you have like so many like options on how to perform something that it can really become something completely different, you know, and like it can become a completely different piece if you just like make an effort to perform it differently, if you think through it and you just settle on a different interpretation. And how much do you think like it really matters what the composer had in mind initially, you know?
I mean, I have a bit of an example actually. I've just received orchestral excerpts for a blind audition in October, and it's brought me back to Tchaikovsky's Sixth Symphony, which was the first symphony I ever played, so I'm really happy to be playing a bit. And if you know the last movement, it's beautiful. It's quite slow, and I find it's unlike many other symphonies. They usually really go out with a bang, but this is quite different. But when you look at the symphony as a whole, it's full of these beautiful melodies, and they seem quite happy. Often D major in this one, very bright. But then when you look into the context about the composer at the time, Tchaikovsky actually had some personal issues, which I'm sure lots of people know, and he actually passed away really close to when the symphony was premiered, because of this. And I think knowing that, it kind of gives all of those melodies a different feel. And when I was performing this before and I didn't know that, it felt really different. It felt bright and just beautiful, and you know, you could just sing forever. But knowing this, it gives it such a different feel. So I think it's so important to know what was going on with their life at the time, if you can find out. And although it maybe wasn't his intention to present said melodies in that way, you can kind of gather that from him as a person, and then that can inform your interpretation. But that's an example that's really changed for me. Yeah, it's crazy.
I think I experienced the same thing when I did a research project on Bruckner 6, and I might be wrong because this was like 2 or 3 years ago at this point, so the details are a little bit foggy. But the first time I listened to it, I was like, oh, this is really interesting. Like it's a really beautiful, very underrated Bruckner symphony. But then I read more into what was going on in his life at that time, and I found out that I believe that he was practically bankrupt at that point, and like he was getting a lot of funding from certain figures in the community to write more music, and that was like the only reason he was able to continue. And what really blew my mind was like he was super depressed at this point, and nobody liked the symphony he wrote. They only ever performed the middle 2 movements while he was alive. The full symphony never premiered at all while he was still living. And of course, Bruckner wrote, like a handful more large orchestral works after this. So it wasn't even like it was at the end of his life. So I thought that was really interesting that even while he wrote a lot of other symphonies, number 6 just wasn't played and it sort of reflects in the way that it's written. It's a little bit different to a lot of Bruckner that we know. And Bruckner had a lot of personal issues from what I remember reading about it. It was a little bit interesting to hear how this really beautiful melody came from this time of really, really difficult financial hardship in his life. And financial hardship is just that's like so hard to get through mentally because it's just like constant worry about stuff. I can't even imagine like back then because when he was alive, like if you ran out of money, you just like you were done for good. Like there was no coming back from that. At least from what I know. And he was. It's so interesting. Like especially even like in modern pieces, if you are working with a composer. When I was in a wind band, one time we brought in a composer and we worked with him, and we had a pretty good idea what the piece was supposed to be like. But then like he would get here and he worked with us and he was like, oh no, it's supposed to sound like this. And we were like, oh, okay, that makes more sense now. And so the pieces that we played on that concert sort of changed, did a complete 180 as to what our interpretation was. So it's interesting to look at the historical aspect from composers that are no longer with us, but then also to have like direct feedback on more modern pieces, which is it's sort of a weird like. And on one end, it's like you have to infer a lot about what they were feeling because you can't talk to them. And then on the other end, it's literally them talking to you. So it's a weird divide of how detailed you can get with the composer's interpretation.
Yeah, something that kind of crossed my mind when we were talking about this whole thing is like for me as a composer, I am never composing for like the actual moment, for like right now, because the thing is, it is really hard to get a piece performed, and like when I'm composing, I'm always thinking perhaps 3 years from now, like will this be relevant? And even then, like if I get it performed 3 years from now, will it still be relevant like 100 years from now, or maybe even like 50 years from now? Like I hope. And like for you guys, it's completely different because you are actually thinking about right now and hoping that what you do today will last and your performances will be relevant and will set a precedent for the future. Like for me, this was basically one of the main reasons why I mean I almost don't play the electric guitar anymore because I dedicate almost my whole time to composing. But like this was something that kind of threw me off from playing the guitar because it's like I have to practice so much to do something that perhaps I will completely screw up like at the moment in which I'm performing, and it's like I practice everything for like almost no reason. And like I know this is not like right in terms of like how it really is, because if you practice, like your performance will get better one way or another. But like for me, something that like brought me to composition is the fact that I can sit here like on my desk and work on it until it's like it's done. It's exactly how I want it to be, and like it doesn't matter like the actual moments. Like I like the piece is being performed because I can prepare everything before, like, and actually work on something that I believe will be relevant years from now. Like how does it feel, and like what is your perspective on all of this?
I think for me, in the moment, I mean, those things you were saying about you don't play electric guitar as much now because you're thinking about potentially in the moment you might screw up. I mean, that still crosses my mind as a performer, especially if you've got something extremely scary coming up. I myself do suffer with performance nerves quite extensively, so that is in my head. But I think it's just the drive to strive to get it right, and I think those times where you do get it right, you just hold on to those. But I completely get the stress of in the moment and why you have maybe taken more to composition, because you can be that much more prepared, and it's more in your control. And I think for me, auditions are obviously such an in the moment thing. That's what I'm thinking of. And sight reading. Sight reading can really, sight reading can scare people because, of course, you can't even prepare really anything for that. I think, you can prepare sight reading, but you obviously won't get, it's unlikely you're going to get the same sight reading in the test. So, yeah, I'm going off on an absolute tangent, but it's very different, isn't it, in the moment and being prepared beforehand. Just the mindset has to be so different.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Sight reading is like that's one of the things that I'm curious about when if I eventually become like a studio musician or a full-time orchestral musician. It's just like if we're premiering a new work, like I've heard stories of like members of the New York Phil, like they have this really modern, very interesting trombone part, and they have like 3 days to work it up to like New York Phil premiere level, which is a very high standard. Like if your piece is being premiered by the New York Phil, clearly you've done something well. And like sometimes there's just certain techniques that you need to hash out like really quickly, and you can't afford to spend any time on it. So it's going to be really interesting because right now I have the luxury of being able to prepare stuff, and that's something that I think about often. So sometimes in my practice, if I have time, I'll just go and find like a random piece of music that I haven't read before, some random orchestral excerpt, or like a piece of music that's not even written for trombone, and then try to play it, just so that I can try to better prepare myself for whatever the orchestra librarian is going to put on my stand sometime in the future. That's especially true for like recording musicians. Like you got a gig like to record for a soundtrack for a new film that's coming out. It's like you're probably never going to have played anything remotely close to what is supposed to be there. And then maybe on the off chance you get something that's relatively like similar to something that's been done before, like Star Wars or something like that, then great. You recorded on a new Star Wars movie and that's fine. But then you get down to like a little bit of a lower budget movie that doesn't have a John Williams score, and it's completely different ballpark. So sight reading is one of those things that's like it's so hard to like practice sight reading because like at any point you're gonna see another piece of music and you're gonna be like, all right, I didn't prepare enough for that. And then you're just gonna have to fall back on your practice that you've done, and like it goes back to sort of with the mindset thing, like in the moment, like in a moment when if you're like sight reading a piece of music and you're doing like a recording, you have to fall back on your own abilities and sort of let that carry you through if something is insanely difficult. Like Giant Steps, for example, the piano player on Giant Steps, everybody in the jazz community was like making fun of him for a long time on like Facebook. It was like a whole like 8-month thing where people were just making fun of the piano player on Giant Steps because the recording of Giant Steps, when the piano player takes his solo, he can't keep up because it's like 300 beats a minute, and it's this really, really hard. These changes are like really hard, and at the time, nothing had really been done that was similar to Giant Steps. And so like you can hear it in his solo. At one point, he like loses track and he just starts outlining chords, and that's the end of his solo. And it's like a quarter of the length of Coltrane's solo. And that's one of those moments like where you have like 1 or 2 takes to get it right, and in that moment, like there's not much you can do. So it's a weird aspect to think about being a musician that does stuff like that, where you have to just be such a bulletproof sight reader, and that's such a hard thing to become.
Definitely, like what Zack was saying, if you can just prepare as much as you can, because although performing is in the moment, you have got that prep. If you do it, you can have the prep. like go picking out that piece and just doing it just to play. Even record yourself, see what you do in the moment. Yeah, stuff like that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Something I think is somewhat close to that when it comes to music composition is like sometimes institutions like conservatoires, universities have kind of an audition process in which you have to like, do counterpoint. You have to do like kind of exercises, and like the thing is, no matter how much you practice your counterpoint and this kind of stuff, like sometimes they will ask you to like write a fugue, and they will give you a fugue theme that simply is not ideal. You know, it's like it's prepared for a fugue, for example, but it's just something that you will have to sit down and think about it. And sometimes you have 4 hours to put something together, and you just like you can't afford to keep reading back your score and searching for mistakes, because you just have to write sometimes a 3 or 4 minute fugue, and it has to be not perfect, because it simply won't be perfect right away, but it has to have the like highest like, quality standard that you can attach to it like right away. And um, it's once again one of those things that like you can only prepare so much, but like until you're actually there trying to do it, like I mean, in the moment everything is different, right? And like there's no way you can possibly like prepare for that. It's, like besides just doing it so much until you're somewhat comfortable with doing this. And I think that something that is interesting about all of this, and like right now we are all on quarantine, and like time passes differently on quarantine. Like everything feels different on quarantine, even though like sometimes we as musicians just spend so much time in because we have to practice and we have to like, study so much. But for some reason on quarantine things just feel different, right? So at the same time, like although many events like have been postponed or some have been canceled, I am sure that you are both still trying to maintain like a schedule of practice and preparing for stuff that's coming up in the future. And like you were trying to prepare, but suddenly, like in a few weeks, basically the whole way like the world works and the whole way we can relate to the outside world has changed. And how has all of this affected you, especially like within the context we were talking about, like within the context of preparing something that like although you prepare so much at the moment, everything is just different, you know?
I feel like for me specifically, it's been a pretty dramatic change, because you know this might come across as a little like I'm not fully fluent in the world of violin, so excuse me if I say something wrong. But violin overall is a relatively it's softer when compared to something like that. Um, and it sounds a lot prettier to the average listener than that. And so it's been hard for me to just find spaces to practice because I basically play a foghorn that sometimes sounds nice. And so not everybody wants to hear me droning away on long tones or lip slurs for an hour or two at a time. So I've been very fortunate to have connections who have connections, and I've been able to find spaces to practice. But if I didn't have those connections, I would be really struggling. Like because I just moved to Ohio, and for the first like week and a half, 2 weeks, I was practicing in my car, in the back of my car, because I didn't have a space to practice, and I was just sweating like crazy because it's super hot. And obviously, I can't just sit there and let my car idle because that's a waste of gas and it's bad for the environment, and I feel bad doing that. But the just like the difference in the way I have to live my life and how I have to structure my practice is pretty ridiculous because I don't have the like as weird as it sounds, because playing a brass instrument in a tiny practice room is awful. Like acoustically, it's just horrible. But I cannot wait to go back to a practice room because then I'll have a space that I can go to at any time and practice whenever I want, which is something that I've been sorely lacking for the last however many months, 3 months or something at this point. Like it's been crazy the past 3 months. It's so weird.
I'm not sure if Zach's like if your college have carried on with the course into this. For us, it's a third term. So yeah, we broke up. Well, we had to leave about March, and we just kind of finished July. So luckily we still had some classes. My teacher, because I'm in the UK, my teacher's from Prague, so we've kind of done Skype lessons, Zoom lessons before. So that wasn't too bad, and we also did group classes still every week, which was nice because it got us performing still. But it's so different. It's so different to doing it in person. And as well for me, my end of year recital was cancelled because I'm only a first year, so this year doesn't count for me. But it's still not having that was really sad. Having that almost complete first year, but I had to record a technical assignment. That was really strange, and that's again is so different because, like you were saying, in the moment when you've got an exam, you only have that one shot and then it's done. Whereas doing it at home, you could just keep recording forever until you're happy. So that was a challenge in a way. Just having to say that's enough, that's done. But for me, I'm actually back home at the moment because I don't live ever so far from Manchester, so I'm very lucky compared to some. And my parents, they're very understanding of my practice. They're not musicians, but very understanding. So I have a specific room that I go in, and it seems big enough, and luckily it's got mirrors. So I've been very, very fortunate. But what's been really crucial for me is making a practice diary. I've always done this anyway, but especially now because otherwise I'd just be swimming about, not knowing where I was going at all. And making some goals. I recently made some summer goals, things I want to hopefully achieve by the time I go back to college in September, because I think things are slightly further along with this whole situation in the UK than where you guys are, as I understand from speaking to Jean earlier. But it's kind of just making those deadlines for myself. That's been really helpful. But I know friends, they've maybe they've chatted and maybe said, oh, we're going to make a performance class, so it gives inspiration that we can do that without the teachers because we're not having teaching now until September. So it's giving that motivation because that's obviously quite an issue for some people. Yeah, it's tricky, but we're all in it, aren't we?
Yeah.
It's
And
funny you mentioned the whole recital thing because I actually graduated from my university this past year. So my degree recital was canceled, which is like the biggest performance I would have done. But I still had to record it. So I had to sit in my bedroom and down in a chair with a full suit on and just play with no accompaniment for an hour, basically. And then that was my big recital. And that was so... because I've been, some of that music I've been working on for over a year because it was just that difficult. And I was so excited to play. It had been such a stressful thing in the months leading up to when we, because what happened was we went on spring break and we never came back to school. And my degree recital was supposed to be the weekend after we came back. So literally I was like 1 week away from my recital and it got canceled. So I had done all the work. And I was so crushed by that because not only had I put in a lot of money into it, like practicing with my accompanist and then also buying all the parts, because some of them weren't just piano and bass trombone, it was like piano and then ensemble. So I had to buy all the parts and try to organize that, and it was a great learning experience, sure, to organize all that. But at the same time, I didn't actually get to play it. So all of that was so like when I heard that we weren't gonna like come back, I was just like, oh man. It at least it makes my next performance that much more special. But it was really kind of like a really depressing like couple weeks there where I was like, man, all that work that I put in was for like nothing. But hey, I got better because of it, a better player. So that's at least one positive thing that I can take away.
At least you've kind of done it as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and like quarantine like has kind of like two, the way I see it, like it has two main aspects, which are like you have this kind of stuff which is like very clearly like problem. We can all see it. Like you couldn't perform that day, you know, and like you were so excited for it and it was canceled. Like it's like black and white. Like you were going to perform, now because of quarantine you can't. But there are also like some things that like are so subtle about quarantine, like that do affect us. And I think like the effect it has, like at least on me, it's so weird because it's like I used to spend like so many hours in my bedroom just writing and reading, like and practicing like composition. Now I do the exact same stuff, but like I feel like the standards to which I can accomplish stuff is simply different, and and I can't even explain it because like I like sometimes show what I write to other composers like whenever I can, and like they have like assured me that my like standard of composition is actually like improving. However, like for me, it feels like it's really decreasing, and like I can only relate that to quarantine, and it's like my perspective over stuff has changed to a way or to a degree in which I like I'm not even sure if like the way I see things now on quarantine is really the way things are. It's like everything has kind of taken like this weird turn, you know. It's like, and I think this relates a lot to like that like of performing and like having that time to perform, like having a recital or having an audition in which like everything that goes on within that window of time, like that's really what matters, you know. And like you can only prepare for it, but like all that happens within that is really your audition or your recital. Because the thing is, like when I used to perform, now when I compose, I feel like my perspective really over my performances or over my compositions is almost always like completely wrong. Like the pieces I like the most when I finish them are usually the ones that I won't enjoy in the future. The ones that like aren't that good when I finish them, like they age a little bit better. And that was true like for performances. When I thought I was doing great, like looking at the recordings, like it was like those were the worst performances I had. And the other way around is also true. Like when I felt like, yeah, this isn't working, like listening back to it, sometimes it sounds like a lot better than what I really did expect it would. Um like this is something really weird about like being a musician. You can never like really be sure where you're at, and like what Pia has said, like about setting up goals and setting up like metrics for yourself. Like this is very important because we can never really like measure our improvement. We can never really like look at or like improvement really and or accomplishments like on a very objective manner. And it is demotivating to never be sure if you're actually improving on what you do, you know. Like
spending more time by yourself for me, obviously, well, for everyone, but even as the only musician in my house, it gives you so much more time to reflect. And I think when you're paying more attention to yourself, sometimes you can not see your progress as much because you're just with yourself all the time. Whereas if when you see someone you haven't seen them for a long time, you go, oh, you look different, or you can notice those changes much more. I'm trying to think, if they change the hair, something really, really small. But like I say, because we're with ourselves all the time at the moment, you don't notice those things as much. So progress might be one, that's difficult really to master.
Yeah, that's one thing I think that is kind of interesting about the whole quarantine thing, because there's like two types of people, two types of musicians I've seen in my own, specifically in the trombone community, because that's where I'm most connected. There are the people that are taking the chance with quarantine, especially those that have full-time positions in orchestras. They have so much more time to do personal practice now. So I know some people, even some people in the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, they took like an entire 2 weeks away from playing trombone because they wanted to do a complete reset and get rid of bad habits that they had been working with before, to try to restructure the way that they play and take this opportunity that they're never going to get another time in their career, hopefully, and just completely rework the way that they play. And then there's the other group that have been taking this time to sort of relax away from the work, but not like just sort of maintain where they're at playing wise, not try to get better. For me, I've been doing the first way. I've been restructuring the way that I play trombone to make it healthier and make it more sustainable. Because like if you play trombone a certain way, it can damage your face, and that's really bad. Needless to say. So forming new good habits that are more sustainable has been a really big plus point for me during quarantine. But it's so difficult when you're alone to like see if you've made any progress. The only reason I know is because I just record myself constantly. And then I like recently I've been looking back from videos at the beginning of quarantine, and I'm like, oh yeah, I did used to sound like that, but now I've improved this amount, which has been really great. I feel like once eventually quarantine is over, probably sometime in 2021, hopefully they'll have found some sort of solution to this whole thing. Fingers crossed. But eventually, if we get back to some sense of normality, I'm going to come out of this a much better player than I went into it. So that is one positive aspect of the quarantine, is that it's enabled so many people to restructure and reevaluate the way that they do things and make it better, which is really interesting and really cool because, like I said, people in the Chicago Symphony Orchestra are really busy. So the fact that they have the time, even like these are not young people either. Like the Chicago Symphony Orchestra trombone section, they're all really old. The principal trombonist is 80. He's 80.
No way.
Yeah, he's
Wow.
80 years old and he's still playing.
Wow.
And I believe it was the assistant principal, the second trombone in the orchestra, that was taking the time away to completely restructure. And he's not like 80, but he's certainly not somebody around my age. I'm only 22. He's definitely got a few decades on me. So even when you've been playing trombone for like 30, 40 years, the fact that they have this opportunity to restructure what they did for those past 30, 40 years, it's kind of really interesting to see so many levels of players restructuring the way that they approach music. It's really, really cool, especially because now everybody's doing stuff online, myself included. I've made multi-track videos that I never would have done otherwise, and I've started posting a lot more on Instagram, and I've gotten a larger connection to the community because of that. So like it's really cool to see all these different kinds of people being connected and sort of linking up to sort of make the quarantine a bit less painful to get through.
Yeah, and do you both think that like the classical music community, like at least the parts you are a part of, has been able to deal with quarantine well in terms of like keeping up with kind of this link between people, like even if through internet, like or
on
just have to-
Instagram. Oh, sorry, you go.
No, go ahead. I was just gonna say one short little thing. I was just gonna say I think so.
Oh, sure. On Instagram, I've known a lot of string players. They've been doing a lot of practice challenge or technique challenges, and that's been quite inspiring for a lot of people. So kind of, again, that goal setting, oh, I'm really going to try and do this with this amount of time with this specific goal. So I've seen that quite a lot, and that's, I think, a really nice idea. But for some people, that my friends, my colleagues, some have really gone with it, really swam, and some have drowned a little bit, not that drastic, but motivation wise, like I was saying before, lots of them I've found, they often say it's very difficult to start practice, and to have that motivation to really pick up and start and go for a good practice session, especially without maybe having a practice room booked, because it's so free. So I think that's been a big problem for some people in my friendship groups, and colleagues. But I think it's got better as time's gone on, because people have put resources out on the internet. We've had some from college that have really helped structure it. So as we've gone on, we've learned more, and hopefully that can be passed to people who are behind in the process as well, and they can kind of get on board with it. But it's been a very mixed. It's just very mixed bunch of people. I think it depends on how you are as a person as well. For me as well, something that kind of popped up, I was quite okay at the start of quarantine. When I had to come home, I was sad that I wouldn't be seeing, especially my quartet. But because of my practice diary, it kind of really spurs me on to keep going. So I didn't find that too much of a problem, because I kind of made a little routine, and that's worked really well. But it was about 2 months in, actually, I really hit a bit of a wall, because I had all this time. So it's just, I think, like I say, it depends who you are as a person as well as a musician, how it affects you, because mine was absolutely fine, then it went a bit like this, whereas some people went like that straight away, and now they're coming back up. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's like, as we're working through this whole quarantine thing, I keep saying it's interesting, because it really is, but it's so interesting to see like what opportunities have presented itself. Like for example, before we finished up the semester, for orchestra, what we would do is we would all do these big Zoom classes where they would bring in like 2 special guests per class period, and then each of them would talk for an hour of the 2 hour rehearsal time. They would do like master classes, they would do some coaching, they would talk about their experiences in an orchestra. We brought in a violist from the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, and I got to play for the principal trombone of the Boston Symphony Orchestra. Like he's like one of the top 5 trombone players alive right now, and I actually got the chance to play for him, which was really awesome. And without this whole quarantine thing, none of that would have happened. So it's so interesting that there are so many things that have been taken away, but because of the quarantine and how organizations are handling it, like universities changing the way their curriculum works, to bring in special guests instead of just saying, oh, it's orchestra, you can't meet in person anymore, so I guess you're just done for the semester. Instead, they actually brought people in, which was really cool and very educational. It's just so different from what I would have expected to happen. Like if like a year ago, if you had told me, hey, the last like 2 months of your senior year, you're not gonna be in the music building at all, and you're gonna have no more classes in person, and I would have been like, oh, well, that sounds like, did the world end? Like, this sounds awful. But then, like, I wouldn't have expected my first thought to have been, oh, you're actually going to get the chance to play for all these people and to meet a bunch of new people and get all this experience that you otherwise wouldn't have gotten, um, which I think is just super cool, to like explore the boundaries, specifically for education, about what we can do in this situation. Because like a lot of people at the beginning, when everything was still up in the air about whether this would actually become a full-scale pandemic, and I'm talking like week 1 of everybody freaking out, some people were like, oh, we'll be back in 2 weeks. Some people were like, oh, we're not going to be back for a while. But nobody knew what education was going to be like for musicians specifically. A lot of people were just thinking that it was just going to be an easy coast for the rest of the semester. And like, I'm really grateful for how much effort the teachers put in on such a short notice to restructure everything and make it worth our time. Because like that, it would be so easy to just blow it off and just say like, oh, there's only like 7 weeks left in the semester, whatever. Like I'll just, the class only meets 2 times a week. We can sort of just skate by. But instead, they put in a ton of effort to try to make it actually educational and worthwhile, which I thought was really cool. So I think in general, specifically for musicians, we have responded in a really positive way to the quarantine, which I think is awesome. Because I mean, like I said, I would have never gotten these experiences if they hadn't taken the time to spend their free time to reach out to people and try to make connections and try to make stuff happen. It's just been so cool to see how much closer together everybody's gotten, and yet at the same time we're farther apart than ever. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah, I have kind of a cool example around that. This podcast kind of exists because of all of this, and you are the guests that came in because of all of this. Because I met Zack at the RSO Discord server, which I got there because quarantine started, and someone saw my video and asked me to teach there. And then, my first class was going to be about applying to conservatories, so I reached out to Pia, and that's how we first got in touch. So literally, this wouldn't be happening right now, if it wasn't for quarantine, or it would be happening in a completely different way. So there are very tangible examples of that, I think it's really interesting because even the idea of making a podcast would have